Had the first Jackson Hole meeting with Kevin Warsh as the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he had his press conference earlier this morning. Just going to dissect it a little bit. Now, as you know, my stance on the Fed, I do not care what the federal funds rate is. It does not affect mortgage rates in the slightest. The previous chairman was famous for saying data dependent constantly. Seems like Chairman Warsh has a different term that he is wanting to use today. So we'll get into that. He started off with just a diatribe on, how great it is to be there, inspiring from the mountains, all that kind of junk. And instead of just getting to the damn point, it's one of those meetings where, when you're in a, when you're in a company meeting and it could have been an email, it kind of feels like this could have been an email, but in reality, the remarks is what we want to hear. I don't care what the funds rate is. What I want to hear is what their gauge of the economy is and kind of gauging what they see moving forward. So here is the theme, if you will, of this press conference.
Map, but please just don't call it forward guidance. Forward guidance. Forward guidance. So-called forward guidance. Forward guidance. Forward guidance, the role of forward guidance. We should not indulge a regime in which market participants are looking primarily to the Fed for their next trade. Forward guidance, providing forecasts to illustrate the Fed's reaction function, works better in theory than in practice, better in the lab than in the field.
Oh, obviously, he is trying to project that he will not project what the Fed is going to be doing. The funny part is that he does kind of project later a little bit what the Fed is going to do or not to do. But again, I don't really care too much what they're going to do in terms of the actual funds rate. What I do care about is the feeling that they have on the economy and then what their focus is. Because if they state what their focus is, and that tells us what they are still trying to fight, and it gives us a good idea of what we should be thinking as far as, so it does kind of give some forward guidance. He then goes into the Fed's mandate, which, Chairman Powell did every single time. We know price stability, fighting inflation, and then of course, obviously full employment. But as you'll see in the next comments, that sometimes those two things do fight a little bit, and you have to kind of balance it out.
Fourth principle, the Fed also bears responsibility for maximum employment. Achieving both sides of our mandate over the medium term is not an either-or proposition. I do not believe the Fed's dual mandate works at cross purposes. After all, high inflation itself is very harmful to economic prosperity. Fifth principle, short-term interest rates are the predominant tool to achieve the dual mandate. Unconventional policies.
Okay, that's really the main tool they have. So obviously, if you want to, anyone justifying their job is going to make sure one of the only things they can do is absolutely necessary. If we want to talk about broader policy, making economic conditions as a whole favorable to businesses to want to expand, that's a different story, because then, you bring, Congress, states, other, lawmakers, localities and whatnot into the mix to create conditions that are favorable for growth.
Sixth, money matters. I know it's not fashionable these days, but my view is that money has something important to do with monetary policy. We should pay attention to money created by the central bank and money that comes from the banking and financial system. It's true that financial innovations, the subject of this conference, and other factors alter the mechanics that link the monetary base, the velocity of money, and the broader economy. But that is scarcely a reason to ignore the ultimate effects of money on financial conditions and prices.
That's a very astute point.
Finally,
Very astute point. He used the word velocity, which a lot of people don't. He's basically just talking about the Treasury creating money, pumping dollars into the system. Because what is inflation? Inflation is, at its core, it's too many dollars chasing too few goods and services, right? So now each dollar is worthless, right? But the velocity point is very astute, because the inflation of like the late last half of 2021 and 2022, that was, I think, more because of velocity. It was and what he said in the first point before velocity, the government creating too many dollars. But anyway, the high velocity dollars, the reason why I think that the debt that was created 2021, 2022, 2023 was so damaging was because so much of it went directly into consumers' pockets who needed it for everyday expenses and whatnot. It wasn't like creating dollars that went out to foreign aid and went out into other markets and whatnot, never came back. There was all these dollars that flooded our system, and the velocity was very, very high. So all of a sudden, all those trillions of extra dollars were actually in our system being used right now.
let's turn to the economy today. Now, you may have read in the July minutes the unanimous view of the FOMC. Labor markets were stable, output solid, but inflation remained too high. A good majority of my colleagues and I thought the wiser course was to await new information in the intermeeting period, especially given possible developments in supply chains, investment flows, and geopolitics.
See, so he is still, they are still kind of waiting out the Iran conflict because they know that the supply of oil, due to the supply shocks due to the Iran conflict, have affected prices. I don't consider that inflation. I consider that price changes, if you will, based on temporary supply chain issues. It wasn't a weakening dollar, right? That we had, where we had some cost issues, but they are monitoring that to see if it has any lasting effects. That's what he's saying.
We're deciding whether a change in interest rate policy was advisable, and we expressed our joint readiness to act as circumstances require. For my part today, as we sit here, I'm impressed by the overall performance of the economy, which appears to have strengthened.
Okay, so he has this next section, he's gone in, talked about the economy. He is basically saying strong and resilient, which he is forecasting what they think what they are going to do, right? That's what he's doing right now. He's not providing forward guidance, if you will, but
So on the employment side of the Fed's dual mandate, our country's doing well. Labor markets are quite stable. The jobless rate at 4.1% remains low by historical standards and hasn't changed much in a couple of years. Unemployment claims on a 4-week moving average, an empirically robust real-time indicator, are near their lowest level in decades. But as of now, I believe the labor markets are broadly consistent with full employment. But on the price stability side of our mandate, the numbers are more concerning. And while this summer's PCE and CPI readings were better than expected, they do not tell me that underlying trends have meaningfully improved. The data also show moderate wage growth.
So that signals right there that they will not lower the funds rate. I personally think it'd be silly to raise it. There's really no need to raise it. So this is where he is providing forward guidance, because he's telling you in these last couple of minutes that the economy is on good footing and that employment is solid, but they still have work to do on inflation. And the Fed's primary tool or weapon to fight inflation is to keep the funds rate high or higher, in order to pull dollars out of the economy. That velocity that we talked about. So it would be silly to lower it. He's not saying he's lowering it. But I also think it would be foolish to raise it, because we're still, like he said, he previously said that we saw modest inflation reduction over the last 18 months basically, which that makes sense. It's hard. The last part of the marathon is the toughest, right? The last few miles are the toughest, and so we've made good progress, and prices. We still have inflation, but not as great as before. I think that the biggest factor right now, like I said, the change in consumer prices is due to energy, and if we see that the Iran conflict is either getting wrapped up, or if Iran just has no more resources yet to fight, then we'll see more normal flows of oil. The supply of oil, moving back around the world again, will stabilize, and then will we see inflation continue to come down to where we want it. And I think that is the more prudent option here, is just holding the funds rate where we are, because there's other factors at play that the Fed has no control over in order to fight inflation. So I think that what we'll probably see next month is a hold in that. Now, again, that doesn't matter for mortgage rates at all. What matters is the mentality and the where the Federal Reserve governors feel like they are progressing on their mandates. And in this sense, they feel like they need to keep fighting inflation, meaning they'll probably hold the funds rate. They want to keep fighting inflation. Long term, that is good for rates, because if they keep fighting inflation and if their work is correct, not necessarily correct, if what they are doing does in fact work and continues to lower the rate of inflation, then as you've seen in my other analyses, in every chart I show, mortgage rates follow inflation closer than any other metric. They do bounce around due to data in the short term, but they always get pulled in that inflation direction every time. I think that it is good to be a little bit hawkish just in terms of our needs in the real estate and mortgage industry, because we should not want, but we are probably never going to see those 3% rates again. But what we should hope for is for inflation to come down into the ones, mid to low ones, and then hopefully we have average mortgage rates in the fives again, or low fives. That would be fantastic, and I think that would be a more sustainable and consistent market for the rest of us. So, and then of course he closes out with a pretty firm statement on his intentions. Warsh is definitely taking it on his shoulders, or putting everything on his shoulders, and laying out that the buck stops with him. Basically, the buck stops with the governors, and that they are going to accomplish their mission or their goal with inflation, as you can see here.
Miss responsibility for 65 months of sustained elevated inflation sits squarely with the central bank, and that's where it belongs. So here is my standard. We must be confident that underlying inflation is moving to our objective clearly and at sufficient speed. Otherwise, we have work to do. That's our job, that's our mandate, and that's our charge to keep.
So there's no dancing around that.